Why competent workers become incompetent managers. Understanding and addressing the factors contributing to certain types of incompetent managers can foster a more effective leadership structure and talent development pipeline. By Tomas, Chamorro-Premuzic, and Sonny Lee. Managers play a crucial role in shaping an employee's experience. For example, research shows that nearly 70% of the variability in employee engagement can be predicted by their manager's behavior, decisions, and personality traits. In other words, whether people are happy, energized, or miserable at work depends mostly on their boss and whether or not they're an incompetent manager. Sounds about right. Unfortunately, the impact of managers on employees often skews more detrimental than empowering. Many employees quit their boss, not their job. Indeed, a recent Gallup study of over 7,000 adults found that 50% of employees quit to escape an incompetent manager. 50, yeah, that actually sounds about right. Most people are probably going to, like, they don't care that much about the direction of the CEO. Like, if I even think about the startups that I've worked at, most people didn't really give a crap about the CEO or the direction he wanted to take the product or even where the product manager wanted to take the product. They cared about who they had to report to and the expectations given to them and the communication and appraisal. And that they cared for the approval of their manager, which makes sense because they're going to affect your life most significantly. You're working with them much closer than you're working with a lot of other people. Usually. So I think that's fair. Naturally, the reasons why some managers are so incompetent have captivated researchers and practitioners, including us. Theories abound regarding the paradoxical fact that inept individuals somehow manage to advance their careers, climb the organizational ladder, and fail upwards to everyone else's peril. I mean, it's social. It's a cultural fit. It's how you play politics. Some incompetent managers get ahead due to their overconfidence or narcissistic traits. I would argue like most people just move up given their confidence. And I think that's the trait that's really like their confidence and their, not just their confidence, but their initiative, the way they speak to people. They don't hold things back. And I think a lot of people would move a little bit forward with speaking their mind in a constructive, kind way, but like establishing boundaries. People respect that. A lot of people are just afraid to speak up. And I do think that holds them back. And you cannot be that way as a manager. It's terrible. You're not even going to gain the respect of your employees if you aren't speaking your mind. Because not only do you need to communicate well with your employees, but you need to like push back on your manager to protect your employees and your team. And if you aren't even willing to stand up for yourself, like why the hell should anyone trust you or respect you or like trust that you are going to fight for them when they need you to fight for them? They're not. So I don't even think it's like overconfidence and narcissistic is like, those are the like very common traits among managers in general. I think it's just like, I guess what I'm trying to say is all you really need is confidence and initiative and establish your boundaries and speak up when those boundaries aren't being respected. But I think they're trying to pin incompetent managers on overconfidence and narcissistic. I don't know. Well, I guess you get this. I got to continue reading this article, but I guess you do get this with companies where those kind of traits aren't initially detected and they are, they like people are reading confidence where it is like arrogance and insecurity, but they're just loud and they're assertive, right? So I can see people getting ahead because they are loud and assertive, but they don't get ahead for very long. Usually that ends up getting outed. Usually that ends up getting identified as employees more, like the employee morale goes down as complaints come in, as employees quit. That is expensive. And when that's identified, usually those incompetent managers do not last long at all. Let's continue reading. Likewise, some individuals can get ahead through their powerful connections, political skills, or purely by some luck theory can't explain. Some of this luck bullshit. I hate luck. Way too many people lean on luck having much of any influence on their career, and I think it's complete bullshit. We have, everyone has opportunities come their way, and how you take advantage and how prepared you are to be able to take advantage of those opportunities is what gets you a lot of the positions you have in life. There's something that luck, like the word luck, is just abused by so many people who don't take control over their actual trajectory. They just continue to fuck up our opportunity after opportunity and just say that some people are lucky. I hate this word. It's so terrible for career progression. Unsurprisingly, this is even more common in political elections, where voters are not always skilled enough to evaluate candidates' potential or unwilling to scrutinize them properly than in corporations. Why are we getting into political elections? Even more intriguing is that it's not uncommon for individuals who perform well in their... What the fuck was that? What are we talking about with political elections? Even more intriguing is that it's not uncommon for individuals who perform well in their jobs as individual contributors to fail to perform as expected when given managerial or leadership responsibilities. Much like great individual athletes can disappoint after retiring and transitioning to team coaches or managers. Yes, this is very true. They're two different positions that require different skills. The phenomenon is well explained in the Peter Principle by Lawrence J. Peter and Raymond Hall in 1969. The core premise of the principle is simple. In an organizational hierarchy, every employee tends to rise to his level of incompetence. That is, people get promoted until they are no longer worthy of promotion. And I think that's a really good observation. I would agree with that, which means that their actual potential is where they end up minus one level. Gotcha. Or the role before their stagnation, which can be improved with good training, by the way. Some managers do go unchecked for a little bit too long, and that's why you need a process to be able to get employee feedback that goes past your manager. The Peter Principle. The Peter Principle is an old concept, but it still explains some of the biggest problems in organizations. The presence of incompetent managers who frustrate their subordinates, and the leaks in silos and talent development. You may not have heard about the term, but you'll likely agree with the concept once we explain it. You may have suffered the impact of the actual effect if you have worked or are working for someone who ended up as your boss without having the leadership or management skills to manage people, including you. According to the original example from the author's book, in a pill rolling factory, a high-performing factory worker, once promoted to their first managerial role, will stay there until the end of their career because they did not have the people skills to manage effectively. Remember, these workers were promoted based on how fast they produce roll products, but didn't know how to manage other workers. Like, where's the responsibility for the lack of training for this manager? Right? So essentially, these companies are promoting people and they're not providing them the support to be able to do their job effectively. Sounds like the problem's the companies. Because who's going to refuse? You probably should think about if you want to get into a managerial position, because sometimes people just consider the pay or the prestige of it, and they don't realize this is going to be condescending, but to some extent, it's a babysitting position. It is, and you can't have an ego. You can't. You have to have a lot of confidence, and a lot of people don't have that confidence to be able to have the conversations that they need to have with their employees. But all of this can be trained, all of it. This is not set in stone with your personality. Why aren't companies supporting people that they do promote? Why are they just tossing them to the wolves? Yale professor Kelly Shue and her colleagues' recent field study provides the first large-scale evidence for the Peter Principle. More than 50 years after the concept was introduced, this paper analyzed promotion practices in 153 different sales organizations over the 6 years, covering nearly 40,000 workers considered for promotion to managerial positions. Her findings are fascinating. worth detailing. First, they found that companies still prioritize employees' prior performance, individual sales performance in this case, over their managerial potential in their promotional decisions. It seems little has changed since the 1960s when many factories promoted workers into managerial roles based on manufacturing efficiency rather than managerial potential. Second, they discovered that new managers' pre-promotion sales performance was negatively related to their effectiveness as a manager. They discovered that the new manager's pre-promotion sales performance was negatively related. Am I just misreading this? Such as in team management and creating collaborative commissions. So you're saying like their sales performance was better when they weren't that collaborative? Am I reading this correctly? Like there was a negative correlation where their manager ability goes down as their performance with sales goes up? High-performing sales workers often turn out to be less effective. Oh, you just said it. Or incompetent managers. Why? Is that feels like a sales thing? I wonder, like, if I think about developers, I think really good developers are kind of autistic. Like, not all, but I feel like really good developers get so focused and so deeply ingrained in their craft, and they're so driven, and they're so, I don't know, they're just so in a flow state, and they don't give a shit about anything else. They're just so like narrowed in to the problem that they're trying to solve, where they neglect other things, right? Like maybe really effective sales workers are not building up the variety of skills to be able to be collaborative and build up those soft skills on the side. That could be it. In their seminal book, Peter and Hall developed a principle as a satirical critique of the inefficiencies often found in management practices and relied heavily on hypothetical cases. However, emerging evidence supports the principle's core assertion by showing that promotions focused on past performance can lead to employees reaching their level of incompetence. As research shows, this practice can be costly for organizations and individuals by promoting managers with inadequate skills or stripping promotion chances from those with excellent managerial skills who fall a bit behind a cutthroat sales competition. This feels very sales specific. Not applicable to all promotion scenarios. There has been some criticism of the Peter Principle, arguing that it oversimplifies the complex dynamics of promotions, which are often specific to different contexts. We also acknowledge that the principle does not apply universally to all scenarios. For example, in highly technical roles I just need to keep reading. For example, in highly technical roles such as software engineering or computer science, individuals can be promoted to increasingly complex stages within the same discipline for which they are initially hired. In this situation, career growth and promotion based on past performance can enhance workers' competence through continuous skill development and deepening exercise rather than leading to a mismatch of skills. So this is where I should have just waited and read, but I didn't know. There are people... So with software engineering, a lot of times it's just the people skills that are never built up. It's good developers that don't want to develop people skills and that have actually been, that they got into tech, they got into coding, and they just kind of got so obsessed with it because they didn't want to go outside. They didn't want to hang out at parties. They didn't want to meet new people. They found a purpose. They found where they fit. They found excitement, and they were thrilled to do it. They learned from it. They grew from it, and they just would rather be on the computer and be in that world than reality outside of it. And I think that's a big problem among many software engineers that are promoted, where they don't really want to be a people person. They don't want to build their soft skills. And I see this with a lot of junior developers, and sometimes people get frustrated with me because I say that soft skills are incredibly important nowadays as a software engineer, and they just don't want to build it up. And, they knock out opportunities ahead of them because they refuse to build up those soft skills, and they limit those opportunities. I think that's a problem in software engineering specifically. And so when those people get hired, they are incompetent managers. I think there are two types of incompetent managers. Those types of people that don't want to build up that skill, but also people that have no professional experience as a software engineer. They don't know the problems you're trying to solve, and they're managing people that do solve those specific problems where this highlight is very accurate. You can become a much better manager when you have that previous context. And I don't think there's going to be a negative correlation with you being a better software engineer and you being a worse manager. So I don't think that correlation would exist in the software engineering world, but this was acknowledged here. However, the core mechanisms of the Peter Principle are useful and insightful by showing that incompetent managers sometimes emerge not solely due to toxic characteristics or nepotism, but also because of inefficiencies in organizational incentive systems. Moreover, the principle suggests that merit-based incentive systems can be problematic by promoting unprepared or unsuitable people into managerial positions in some cases. Where are you going with this? I think merit-based incentive systems are great. I think companies want to reward employees for doing their job better and making more money. I don't think the problem is a merit-based incentive system. I just think that when you are promoting them to a different role, that you are providing them the mentorship and the training they need. This stuff can be taught. I think the only problem you're going to encounter is when someone doesn't want to learn this stuff. That's what you're trying to filter out. I don't think the problem is just trying to counter a merit-based incentive system. I think it's just not pairing it well with good mentorship or training. How to address the Peter Principle. Let's hear it. Based on research insights on the fundamental roles of HR systems and emerging trends in the private sector, we suggest 3 ways that can help organizations address and mitigate the seemingly pervasive Peter Principle. Broaden the aims of promotion. Conceptually, promotions within organizations serve to incentivize and reward employees and match individuals to roles for future performance. While these 2 roles are both important, many organizations primarily use promotions as a tool to reward employees. I think that's fair. You know what the solution to that is? Give bigger raises. And don't hire people if you don't have the budget to do that. Stop giving people shitty raises so they don't feel like they need to jump to a new role or switch companies to get that promotion that they probably deserve. That fixes that. Recognizing high performers through promotions can motivate employees and boost morale. However, this approach can backfire if the promoted employees do not possess the necessary skills for their new roles. When promotions are based solely on past performance, organizations risk placing employees in positions where they may not thrive. So this is true. I agree with this. Thus, the first step to address the Peter Principle is to view promotions broadly as an important matching process to reduce the typical mismatch from overemphasizing a person's past performance. So I agree with this. Not everyone should be promoted. And promotions, just at least in America, or the United States specifically, promotions are a very, very common thing that people will use to even gauge their performance and their trajectory at a company when maybe in reality, some of those employees should just be a little bit more siloed into their own venture within the company and just getting really good at their job, where they could even become a supervisor that is, if they're really good at their job and they are making the company money in their area, why not give them a supervisor role to be able to supervise people that are focused on those specific tasks? At least that previous experience will carry over more. Why not do that? And then again, support them with, like, you don't have to become like an assistant director, CTO. You don't have to have this fancy title, but you can still kind of give them a leadership role or a mentorship role, pay them more for it, and give them the support and mentorship to be able to do that effectively. It doesn't have to be some, like, it could be more of a lateral shift than just trying to move up the corporate ladder. So I think that's the direction that this aims to push forward. I would agree with that. Evaluate and develop leadership potential. One of the core mechanisms behind the Peter Principle is the gap between the skills needed in junior technical roles and those newly and additional required in senior and managerial positions. To improve the promotional system, again, like, most developers can become senior developers just fine if they're given the support, mentorship, and training to be able to do that and gain the people skills for it. To improve the promotional system, especially for significant promotions for team leader or line manager roles, it's essential to consider a person's past performance or technical expertise and leadership potential, such as collaboration experience or services to the team. Organizations can counter the Peter Principle through comprehensive training programs that equip employees with necessary competencies such as people management skills, strategic thinking, and emotional intelligence before promoting them to managerial roles. So now we are on the same page, 100%. Separate career tracks. Yep, and this is what I just talked about. Modern organizational practices increasingly recognize the need for separate career tracks for individual contributors or managers. This approach allows employees to advance and be rewarded with it in their area of expertise without being forced into managerial roles for which they may not be unprepared, or which they might be unprepared. We have met many technical experts thriving in certain sectors and organizations that provide them with opportunities for career growth and development within the same or similar discipline. And they can, like, right, give them a variety, like, if they show an aptitude or if they show an interest even for just management in general, I think more companies would benefit, again, still from promoting within the company for higher manager positions, but give them experience working in different departments to be able to set them up for success. Because a lot of times when you have assistant directors and directors that manage like a variety of different positions, they'll be hired outside, given how they performed at their previous company. When they don't really have the proper context, you're going to get better managers that know the company culture, that have stood with the tribulations of the company and have shown that, like, first of all, they care enough to stay there, but also they know what problems arise with the company. They've overcome that. They're still there. They're still standing. Those are good employees to hire within. But I do think not enough companies will give, like, I think having context of the positions that you are managing is really, really helpful for a manager. And we can't neglect that. But I do think not enough companies will give them that experience and even, like, expose them to problems in some of the positions that they might be managing as well. The Peter Principle remains a significant challenge for organizations. Understanding and addressing the factors contributing to certain types of incompetent managers can foster a more effective leadership structure and talent development pipeline. After all, we all want our promotions to be more escalator to continuous growth and less one step up to a plateau. Yep. Yeah. And I think this is a bit broken. I think this used to be more of a thing in the past, and I think it's less of a thing now. Because I would even argue, like, a lot of times you'd want to move up the corporate ladder over time, and that's just how you moved up. But nowadays you do a lot of lateral movements and even to other companies to get the experience you need to move up faster, right? This idea of, like, moving up in the corporate ladder with a lot of companies just isn't a thing anymore. You don't have, first of all, you don't have loyalty. Like, companies aren't showing employees loyalty and employees aren't showing companies loyalty. There's not a lot of loyalty between companies and employees, and both are at fault to some extent, but I would argue more the company's fault in the way they structure things. And a lot of it was just progression, like hyper progression, when you get a burst of revenue, not really supporting companies, just really supporting investors and profit, and not really thinking long term about how this is going to affect your structure or the longevity or even just the happiness of your employees 2-3 years down the road, or their potential careers down the road. So I think it's more on the employees, but there isn't a lot of loyalty, and that is a problem. But you can't really expect this escalator of growth, this upwards movement as much. And I don't think employees should expect that as well. I think you just should get really fucking good at what you want to get good at and focus on that. And if that means making a lateral shift, then do that. If you're a leader, don't just promote employees to the next level. Give them the tools and training they need to thrive at every step of their career. Let's not turn our best engineers into our worst managers. If you're an employee stuck at your last promotion for decades, don't stay complacent. Actively identify the new skills and competencies you need to move to the next level, or consider seeking growth opportunities elsewhere. I think this is huge. I think this is really huge. So I agree. So I don't know. I wasn't sure where these authors were heading with this, but I agree with the 3 solutions. And I think software engineers kind of they kind of understand the lack of loyalty. And they understand that at least they're being educated on how they can advance in tech in general. It's not really an escalator of growth. Sometimes it's lateral movements. Sometimes it's niching down and specializing more. It really depends. Like, you have a lot of options as a software engineer. There's a lot of tracks you can go down. But there are people, like I said, there are 2 bad managers. 2 of the most common bad managers I've seen are people that don't want to develop people skills and aren't held accountable for that. And then people that have no previous professional experience, especially when they're required, like, to be a good software engineer requires a depth of knowledge. Like, it's not a superficial position. You have a manager come in managing and telling software engineers what to do and why they're wrong. You're not going to gain respect of your employees. You're just not. It's a position that requires way too much knowledge and context and experience to be able to do the job well. It's why, like, I grew up, in Northwest Indiana, and we had the mills, and that's where, if you didn't have a college education, you could make quite a bit of money. And this is where I got my first experience of just managers being hired to manage employees that, they had management experience. They didn't have the specific job skills that were needed to gain respect of the employees. And now, to this day, like, you have employees that have zero respect for the managers. They constantly shit on them, and they just run to the union to back them up. Even if they're bad performance, they'll just fuck with the managers just because of it, because there's just this war between the managers and employees, because all these managers keep getting hired that have no damn experience in the positions of the employees that they're managing. And that's a big problem as well. So I think there are multiple ways to promote or hire bad managers. And I think this article does touch on one way, but I think there is a problem with hiring outside with people skills. It just doesn't work either. I don't know. I think everyone's going to encounter some bad, incompetent managers at some point. And I think you have to find the right team. Because I think what was identified initially, which I completely agree with, a lot of people are going to quit because of their manager. Like, that's a big reason people quit. It's why I quit some of my positions. And I would argue, like, anytime I would be stressed about my job or anything like that, a lot of times it came down to the manager that I was working with, or how they would handle, or how they wouldn't fight back for their employees when higher ups would, like, they didn't really understand the context of, like, what happened and why it happened, and that my manager wouldn't fight for us. Like, then I lose respect for that manager. I think it's, but another thing, I think it's really easy as like, most people are employees, not managers. And I think it's really easy to blame the higher up. I think it's very natural for us to blame kind of like a higher, like, just someone that's controlling an authority. I think a lot of us challenge authority because we've dealt with authority figures in our life that wasn't the greatest example, wasn't the greatest influence in our life, or we've dealt with, like, you've always dealt with bad managers, you've dealt with bad teachers, you've dealt with, like, there are people in kind of leadership positions that just sucked at the people skills side of things. They sucked at just leading in general. So I think it's easy to challenge a lot of management and a lot of and like, it's easy to say these companies are just doing a really, really bad job at hiring within. But there's a lot of context that's also missing when managers are hired in. There's a lot of problems within the business that you might not be aware of. There are personal conflicts with employees that where, like, I've even had, there was kind of like an uproar with one of the dev teams because someone was promoted that was, friends with a manager. But so they just automatically assumed that it was nepotism, and managers were just hiring their best friends in and giving them promotions versus the other employees. And I think sometimes people tend to jump to conclusions. Employees tend to jump to conclusions where, like, something just, an action happened that is just completely unfair. And it's usually because employees they feel like they don't have control over their trajectory at the company, and they feel like there isn't enough transparency to see what's going on. And I think a lot of companies would really benefit with sharing why certain people were hired, which is why you should also gauge from your other employees before you choose to promote someone and see what the popular decision is. You're going to have way more success promoting a manager that gets along with people if you have consensus among that team and those employees. And I don't think that's done enough either. Anyways, good article. That's all I have to say. Let me know what your thoughts are. But this is why competent workers become incompetent managers. I'm sure people have opinions about it. Thanks for listening.